The father who forgot me. I never had a picture-perfect father. You know the kind. The ones who take their daughters fishing, cheer the loudest at their school plays, and threaten teenage boys who get too close. That wasn't my dad. My father, Mark, treated parenting like a part-time job, one he could clock in and out of whenever it suited him. He provided the basics, a roof, food, school supplies. But love, warmth, presence, those were luxuries he never bothered to give. When my parents divorced, I was 12. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, watching him shove his clothes into a duffel bag like he was checking out of a cheap motel. "You can visit whenever you want," he said, ruffling my hair like I was some neighbor's kid instead of his daughter. I nodded, but deep down, I knew he wouldn't visit. And I was right. At first, there were the usual excuses. "Work is crazy, sweetheart. Next weekend, I promise." Then came the slow fade. The calls less frequent, the missed birthdays, the growing silence between us. By the time I turned 18, I had stopped waiting. By the time I turned 21, I had stopped caring, or at least I thought I had. Until the day I stumbled upon the truth and realized I had been erased. The discovery that changed everything. It was a lazy Sunday. I had just finished cleaning my tiny apartment, one I had worked so hard for on my own, without a single cent from my father, when I flopped onto the couch, phone in hand, scrolling, liking, mindlessly passing the time. Until I saw it. A wedding photo. Mark, standing under twinkling lights, his arm wrapped tightly around a woman I had never seen before. His bride. She was elegant, champagne-colored gown, hair styled to perfection, the kind of woman who looked like she had never struggled a day in her life. And beside them, 2 teenagers. His new family. The caption? "Feeling blessed. My new beginning." My new what? I blinked, convinced I had read it wrong. But no, there it was. A life-changing event. A celebration. A moment that should have mattered to me. And I hadn't even known it happened. I clicked on the album. Photo after photo. The ceremony, the reception, the cake, the speeches, the smiles. And yet, in this grand new life he had built, there was one thing missing. Me. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even considered. Mark had started over, without me. The moment it became real, my stomach twisted. My fingers gripped the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just that he got remarried. It was that he had deliberately chosen to exclude me. But not her kids. No, they got front row seats. They got the father who smiled in photos, who danced at the reception, who gave speeches about family. I felt the familiar sting of tears, but I swallowed them down. Not for him. Not anymore. I should have seen this coming, because a few weeks ago Mark had actually called me, for the first time in months. The conversation had been strange. "Hey kiddo?" The nickname felt foreign now. "Just wanted to let you know I'm getting married. Nothing big. Just a small thing, you know? Just the 2 of us." Just the 2 of them. I had nodded, forcing a smile. "That's nice, Dad. I'm happy for you." Maybe it really was small. Maybe it really was nothing. But this wasn't small. This was planned. This was deliberate. This was him making a choice. And that choice wasn't me. The call that changed everything. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I had 2 choices. I could ignore it, pretend I never saw it, act like I didn't care. Or I could remind my father that I existed. I pressed call. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, "Hey kiddo." His voice was calm, casual, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just deleted me from his life. "Hey Dad," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Congratulations." Silence. The kind of silence that told me he hadn't expected me to know, hadn't wanted me to know. "Oh, thanks," he said finally. I let the pause stretch. "I saw the pictures," I continued, my voice light, almost conversational. "Looked like a beautiful ceremony. Must have been nice to have your whole family there." Another pause. Longer this time. I could practically hear him scrambling for an excuse. "Tessa, you told me it was just the 2 of you." I cut in. My voice was sharp now. "That's what you said, right? Small. Just you and her." "It was small," he said quickly, defensively. "Just a few close friends and her kids." Her kids. Not his kids. Not me. The words hit like a punch. I exhaled slowly, forcing my voice to stay even. "So let me get this straight," I said. "Her kids got to be there, got to celebrate with you, but your actual daughter, your own blood, didn't?" He sighed, that same tired sigh he always used when he didn't want to deal with something. "Tessa, listen. I didn't think you'd want to come." I blinked. "You didn't think I'd want to come?" The sheer audacity. Since when do you get to decide that for me? It wasn't like that, he muttered. I didn't want things to be awkward. Your mother and I. Oh, don't you dare bring Mom into this, I snapped. This was your decision, no one else's. Silence. Then, I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, his voice softer now. I've moved on, Tessa. I have a new family now. A new family. There it was. The words that confirmed everything. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Right, I said. So when you wrote my new family on Facebook, you meant it literally. I'm not in the picture anymore, am I? Tessa, that's not. No, I cut him off, my voice turning ice cold. I get it, Dad. You replaced me, and that's fine. I took a breath, steadying myself. But don't expect me to act like it didn't happen. Another heavy sigh. Tessa, I don't want to fight with you. Neither do I said. But I want you to remember this moment. Because it was the last time he'd ever get to pretend that what he did was okay. And then, I hung up. For the first time in years, my hands weren't shaking. For the first time in years, I saw things clearly. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about a lifetime of being an afterthought. Well, not anymore. The call that changed everything. I should have let it go. I should have tossed my phone aside, gone for a walk, drowned out the hurt with loud music, moved on like I always had to. But this time, something inside me refused to back down. Mark had chosen to erase me, but he was about to learn that I wasn't so easy to forget. The first message. After hanging up on my father, my pulse was still racing. I had never stood up to him like that before. For years, I had swallowed my feelings, pretended his absence didn't affect me, convinced myself I was stronger for it. But now, I was done pretending. And apparently, my father wasn't ready for that. Because less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. Mark, Tessa, please don't do this, I scoffed. Don't do this. He had ignored me for years. He had started an entire new life without me. And now suddenly, he wanted to talk. I didn't respond. I let him sit with it. Let him feel, for once, what it was like to be the one left waiting. The public post that started it all. Ignoring him wasn't enough. Not this time. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized he wasn't just going to get away with this. So I opened Facebook. I stared at the wedding photos again, my stomach twisting at the smiles, the laughter, the celebration. A celebration I wasn't even considered for. Then, I started typing. Congratulations on your wedding, Dad. Wishing you and your new family all the happiness in the world. Since I wasn't invited, I'll celebrate from afar, just like I always had to growing up. Hope your stepkids appreciate the father they got, since I never had one. Cheers. I hovered over the post button. For a split second, doubt crept in. Is this too much? Too harsh? But then I remembered the years of missed birthdays, the broken promises, the moments I spent watching the door, waiting for him to show up, only to realize he never would. No, this wasn't too much. This was the truth. I hit post and waited. The fallout, it didn't take long. Within minutes, the notifications started rolling in. Likes, comments, shares. At first, they were from people who had no idea I wasn't invited. Cousin Sarah. Wait, you weren't there? Tessa. Is this real? Why would he do that? Uncle Joe, I thought it was just a small ceremony. He made it seem like no one was there. Then came the other side of the family. His side. The ones who always excused his behavior. Stepmom's sister. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he thought you were busy? His coworker. This isn't the place for family drama, Tessa. It's not a good look. Oh, but ignoring your own daughter is? Then came the notification I had been waiting for. Mark commented on your post. My heart pounded as I clicked it. Mark. Tessa, can we talk? Please call me. I smirked. Just hours ago, I had been nothing to him. Now, suddenly, I was important enough to control the damage. But I wasn't finished yet. The final blow, I scrolled through his wedding album again, not because I wanted to, but because I was looking for something specific, and then I found it, a comment. From his boss. Boss, what a beautiful family, Mark. Wishing you and your kids all the best. Kids, plural. His boss thought I was part of this, that we were some happy blended family. And that was the final straw. I clicked reply. Actually, I wasn't invited to the wedding. Mark decided his stepkids were more important than his actual daughter. Just thought you should know. A public reply. A message that couldn't be ignored. And just like that, I had taken control of the narrative. For once in my life, I wasn't the one being erased. The first call, I ignored. It took less than 5 minutes before my phone started ringing. Mark, I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. Seconds later, a text popped up. Mark, Tessa, please call me. We need to talk. I smiled, setting my phone down. For years, I had been the one waiting for him to notice me. Now, he was the one waiting. And I wasn't ready to make it easy. The power shift. Over the next few days, my father kept trying. More calls, more messages, more desperation. It was almost amusing how quickly things had flipped. For years, I had been nothing more than an afterthought to him. Now, I was the only thing he could think about. And that was justice. But I still wasn't done. Because if Mark thought he could bury me in the past, erase me like an old mistake, and move on unscathed, he was about to find out that I was very much still here. And I had one more card to play. The last move. It was 2 days later when I finally picked up his call. The second I answered, I heard relief in his voice. Tessa, he sighed, breathless, like he'd been holding it in for days. We need to talk. I leaned back, keeping my tone flat. Do we? I let the words hang, cool and controlled. Because for once, I had the power. He groaned, frustration bleeding through. Come on, you know that's not fair. I laughed. Like he had ever been fair to me. Enlighten me, Dad, I said. What exactly isn't fair? That I wasn't invited to your wedding? That you never even planned to tell me? Or that I found out on Facebook like some distant acquaintance? Silence. Then he sighed. Tessa, it wasn't intentional. I didn't mean to hurt you. I let out a sharp breath. Then explain it to me, I challenged. Explain why I wasn't good enough to be there. But her kids were front and center. He was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, he spoke, because I didn't want to deal with it. There it was, the truth. The moment I knew it was over. I inhaled slowly. So let me get this straight, I said, voice dangerously calm. You didn't invite me because you didn't want things to be awkward for her? Tessa, it wasn't just about... Then who was it about? I cut in. Because it sure as hell wasn't about me. And in that moment, I knew he hadn't forgotten me. He had made a choice to leave me behind. And now, I was making mine. The truth no longer hidden. For years, my father had made me feel invisible. His absence was nothing new. The forgotten birthdays, the missed phone calls, the way he always had something else to do whenever I needed him. It was a cycle I had learned to live with. But this time, this wasn't just another broken promise. This was erasure. And I was about to make sure he knew exactly what that felt like. The comment that exposed everything. After hanging up on him, I sat in silence, staring at my phone. My chest was tight, my mind racing with 100 thoughts, but one stood out above all the rest. He thought he could control the story. He thought he could start over without me, pretend I didn't exist, erase me quietly. But that wasn't going to happen. Not this time. So I did the only thing I could do. I opened Facebook. I scrolled down to his wedding album, the one filled with perfect smiles and picture-perfect memories. And then I found it, a comment from his boss. Boss, what a beautiful family, Mark. Wishing you and your kids all the best. Kids, plural. As if I had been part of it, as if we were all one happy blended family. And that was my final breaking point. I clicked reply. Actually, I wasn't invited to the wedding. Mark decided his stepkids were more important than his actual daughter. Just thought you should know. A public reply. One that he couldn't ignore. One that made sure everyone knew the truth. The immediate fallout. It didn't take long. Within minutes, the damage was done. The comments started getting likes, replies, questions, his coworkers, his family, his friends, people who had assumed I was included, people who had no idea that he had cut me out completely. Wait, what? You weren't invited? Cousin Sarah. Tessa, this can't be real. Why would he do that? Linda, I thought it was just a small ceremony, Mark. You told everyone it was private. The cracks in his perfectly crafted lie had started to show. And then came the message I had been waiting for. Mark. Tessa, delete that comment. Call me now. I smiled. For years he had been ignoring me. Now, he was chasing me, but I wasn't done yet. The phone that kept ringing, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, voicemails, texts. I let them pile up. For once, I wasn't the one waiting for him to respond. For once, he was the one left wondering what would happen next. And it wasn't just him. His wife messaged me. Tessa, I know this is complicated, but maybe we can talk? I rolled my eyes. Talk? Where was this energy before they decided I wasn't good enough to be part of their family? Then, another message popped up. Stepmom's daughter. Hey, I just wanted to say I had no idea you weren't invited. I'm really sorry. That's messed up. I paused. That, I wasn't expecting. But before I could even think about replying, my phone rang again. And this time, I decided to answer. The conversation that changed everything. About time, Mark sighed in relief the second I picked up. I stayed silent. Tessa, listen, he continued quickly. This is getting out of hand. You need to take down that comment. I let out a slow exhale. Why? Because it's embarrassing, he muttered. People are asking questions. You've made this whole thing look worse than it really is. I laughed. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Did I make you uncomfortable? Tessa, that's not. No, you listen. I cut him off. I spent my whole life making excuses for you, defending you, pretending you were just busy when really, you just didn't care enough. That's not fair. You didn't even bother to invite me to your wedding, I snapped. You replaced me, and now that people finally see you for who you really are, I'm the problem? Silence. A long, suffocating silence. Then, I didn't think you'd care, he admitted, voice quieter now. I clenched my jaw. I had spent my whole childhood waiting for him to care. And now he was telling me he had convinced himself I wouldn't. Guess you were wrong, I said coldly. More silence. Then, I don't know how to fix this, he murmured. And for the first time, I believed him. Because the truth was, he couldn't. The last goodbye, I let out a slow breath. You don't get to walk back into my life because you're suddenly uncomfortable, I said, my voice calm but final. Tessa. No, I shook my head. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. A beat of silence. Then a confession I never expected. I regret it, he admitted softly. I regret everything. And maybe, years ago, that would have meant something to me. Maybe I would have clung to those words, convinced myself it was a second chance. But now, regret wasn't love. And it wasn't enough. I inhaled deeply. I hope you have a great life, Dad, I said. And then, I hung up. The final move. That night, I got a new notification. Mark deleted his wedding photos. I smirked. Too little, too late. Because no matter how hard he tried to erase the proof, the damage was already done. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more waiting, no more hoping, no more pretending, because I had spent years chasing a father who never chased me back. And now, I was done running. The weight of his choices. For years, my father had treated me like an afterthought. Now, for the first time, he was the one feeling discarded. His texts, his calls, his desperate attempts to fix what he had broken, they all went unanswered. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. He had made his choice. Now, he had to live with it. The silence that spoke volumes. The days passed, and I could tell the silence was getting to him. At first, he had been angry. Mark, Tessa, stop acting like a child. Call me back. Then, frustration shifted to pleading. Mark, please, just talk to me. Let's work this out. Then finally, defeat. I messed up, okay? I know I did. I just want to fix this. But some things can't be fixed. And deep down, he knew that. The motherly interference, I should have expected it. Because when my father couldn't get through to me, he did the one thing he always did when life got hard. He looked for an easy way out. And this time, that easy way out was my mother. I was in the middle of folding laundry when my phone rang. I smiled when I saw her name. Hey, Mom. She sighed, and instantly I knew something was wrong. Tessa, honey, I need to talk to you about something. I already knew what was coming. He called you, didn't he? She hesitated. Yes, I closed my eyes, gripping the fabric in my hands. What did he say? He wants to see you. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course, now he wanted to see me. Mom must have sensed my frustration because she quickly added, Tessa, I know you're hurt, and I don't blame you for feeling the way you do. I braced myself. But I think he's scared, she said softly. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Scared of what, Mom? Losing me? He already did. Tessa. No, I cut in firmly. He didn't just forget to invite me to his wedding. He chose not to. She sighed again. I know, and I told him he was wrong for that. But sweetheart, people don't always realize what they have until it's too late. Maybe he's finally starting to understand that. I heard the hope in her voice, the same hope I had carried for years, but I wasn't that little girl anymore. I wasn't the one waiting by the window for him to show up. Mom, I love you, I said, but this isn't your battle. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I just don't want you to have regrets. I smiled sadly. I won't. And for the first time, I meant it. The unexpected visit, A week passed, then two. I thought he had finally given up. But then, he showed up at my door. It was late. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted from the day, when I heard the knock. Firm, familiar. I froze. I knew that knock. I walked to the door, hesitating for just a second before looking through the peephole. Mark, my father. I exhaled slowly. I could ignore him, pretend I wasn't home. But something in me, curiosity maybe, made me unlock the door. I swung it open, my expression unreadable. "What do you want?" He looked older than I remembered. Tired, worn down. His once confident posture had shrunk, like he'd been carrying too much weight for too long. "Tessa," he said, forcing a small, hesitant smile. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. I just stared at him, letting him feel every ounce of the distance between us. Then, finally, no. The truth he wasn't ready for. Mark stood in my doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The same man who once seemed so unreachable, so indifferent, now looked like a man who had run out of places to hide. "Tessa, please," he said, voice softer now. "Just let me explain." I crossed my arms. "Explain what?" I asked. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "That you didn't want me at your wedding?" I continued. "That you made an entirely new family and left me out of it?" He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He wasn't used to this version of me. "I deserve that," he admitted. "I know I do." I raised an eyebrow. That was new. "Then why are you here?" His shoulders dropped like he had finally realized there was no script to get him out of this. "Because I lost you," he said simply. For the first time, something about his voice sounded genuine. "I don't know when it happened," he continued, shaking his head. "Maybe after the divorce, maybe before that. But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that you'd be fine without me, that you didn't need me." He let out a heavy sigh, and I let that belief turn into an excuse. I felt something stir inside me, not forgiveness, not warmth, just sadness. Because years ago this would have meant everything to me. Years ago I would have clung to these words, hoping they meant he was finally ready to be the father I needed. But now they were just too late. The moment I let him go. "What about the wedding?" I asked. Mark looked away. "That was a mistake," he admitted. "A big one." He swallowed hard. "I should have wanted you there, Tessa. I should have fought for you." He met my eyes. And I didn't. He regretted it. I could see that now. But regret wasn't love, and it wasn't enough. I studied him closely. "So what now?" I asked. "You say your piece, and then what? You want me to forgive you? Pretend none of this ever happened?" "No," he said quickly. "I know I don't deserve that. I just—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I just don't want the last thing between us to be anger." I took a deep breath. And then, for the first time in years, I felt nothing. Because I had already grieved the loss of my father a long time ago. He was only now realizing what I had known for years. We were done. "I'm not angry," I said, my voice calm. Relief flickered across his face. "But I wasn't finished. But I'm also not interested in fixing this." His relief shattered. "Tessa, come on." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to walk away for years and then decide you want back in when it's convenient for you. That's not how family works. That's not how love works." His lips pressed into a thin line. He wanted to argue. But what could he say? He had no defense. "I hope you're happy with your new family," I said, stepping back inside. "But I won't be a part of it." He opened his mouth, maybe to say something. Maybe to beg. But I shut the door before he had the chance. And just like that, I let him go. The father who came too late. For years, I had been the one waiting. Waiting for his calls, waiting for his attention, waiting for the day he would finally see me, really see me, as his daughter. But now he was the one waiting for me. And I was in no rush to let him back in. His final, desperate attempts. After shutting the door in my father's face, I expected him to disappear. That's what he had always done. Whenever things got difficult, he walked away. So imagine my surprise when my phone started buzzing, again. "Mark, Tessa, please just talk to me." I ignored it. A few minutes later, another text. "I know I messed up. Just give me a chance to explain." Another. "I can't lose you too." That one made me pause. Too? I stared at the words for a moment before locking my phone. I wasn't going to let his guilt pull me back in. He had lost me a long time ago. He was just now realizing it. The unexpected email. A week passed. Then another. I assumed he had finally given up, accepted that I was done. But then an email landed in my inbox. Subject, "We need to talk." I hesitated before opening it. Tessa, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I made a mistake. I should have handled things differently. Can we meet? Just once? I owe you that much. Dad, I stared at the word dad. For the first time, it didn't feel like it belonged to him anymore. And for once, I didn't feel obligated to answer. I closed the email. I had nothing left to say. The motherly intervention? Again, I should have known my mother would get involved. She always did. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was cleaning up my apartment when my phone rang. I smiled when I saw her name pop up. Hey, Mom? She hesitated. That was my first clue. Tessa, honey, I need to talk to you about something. I sighed, already knowing. He called you again, didn't he? She was quiet for a moment before saying, yes. I closed my eyes. What does he want? He wants to see you. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course he does, now that everyone knows what he did. Tessa, she sighed. I know he hurt you. I know you don't owe him anything, but I also know that if you don't talk to him now, you might regret it later. I shook my head. No, Mom, you don't get it. I've spent my whole life regretting that he wasn't around, that he didn't love me the way a father should. I swallowed hard. But for the first time, I don't feel that regret anymore, because I finally understand it was his choice, not mine. Silence. Then she said softly, I just don't want you to carry this pain forever. I smiled sadly. I'm not carrying it anymore, Mom. He is, and I wasn't going to take it back. The man who showed up at my door. Another week passed, and then it happened. A knock on my door. Firm, familiar. I knew before I even checked who it was. Mark. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I opened the door. He looked older. The weight of his choices settled in the creases of his face, in the slump of his shoulders. Tessa, he said, his voice almost relieved. What do you want? I asked flatly. He blinked, caught off guard by my coldness. He exhaled. I just wanted to talk. I studied him, then shook my head. No. Surprise flickered in his eyes. Tessa, please. You don't get to do this, I interrupted, arms crossed. You don't get to ignore me for years, then show up when you finally realize you screwed up. He ran a hand over his face. I know I messed up. I arched a brow. That's not an apology. That's a statement. He sighed. I regret it, Tessa. I regret everything. And maybe, years ago, I would have clung to those words. But regret isn't love, and it sure as hell isn't enough. The truth he couldn't handle. I know I can't take back what I did, he admitted, voice low. I just don't want this to be the last thing between us. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I finally spoke. I'm not angry anymore. Relief flickered across his face, but I'm also not interested in fixing this. His relief vanished. Tessa, come on. No, I said firmly. You don't get to walk away for years, then expect me to let you back in because it's convenient for you. He looked down, defeated. I just want to be part of your life again. I tilted my head. Funny, that's all I ever wanted too. And yet he hadn't cared until now. The goodbye he never expected. I stepped back. I hope you're happy with your new family. His jaw clenched. But I won't be a part of it. His mouth opened. Maybe to beg, maybe to argue. But I shut the door before he had the chance. And just like that, I let him go. The silence that finally felt like peace. At first, he kept trying. More calls, more emails, more desperate attempts to hold on. But I didn't answer. Because the truth, he had already taught me how to live without him. And for the first time, I was finally ready to move forward. No more waiting, no more hoping, no more chasing after a father who never chased me back. I was done running. The father who lost everything. Once upon a time, I was a girl waiting for her father. Waiting for him to call. Waiting for him to remember me. Waiting for him to show up and prove that I mattered. But now? Now it was his turn to wait. And unlike me, he wasn't strong enough to handle the silence. The unanswered calls. At first, the texts kept coming. Mark. Tessa, I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I want to fix this. I don't want to lose you completely. But he already had. He just didn't realize it yet. For weeks, I ignored him. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But because I was finally free. And I had no interest in looking back. The whispers of his downfall. I wasn't the only one who had moved on. The world had too. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend. Someone who had always stayed neutral when it came to my father. She hesitated before saying, "You won't believe what's happening with Mark." I raised an eyebrow. "Try me," she sighed. "He lost his job. I blinked. She nodded. Apparently, after everything blew up online, people at his company started talking. His boss wasn't too happy about how it all played out. I crossed my arms. So what happened? She smirked. Let's just say, when you build your reputation on lies, the truth eventually catches up. The man who had everything and lost it all. It turned out, my father's perfect new life wasn't as solid as he thought. He had spent years curating his image, the responsible, loving family man. But after I exposed him, people started seeing the cracks. His colleagues didn't trust him anymore. His boss saw him as a liability. And his new wife? Well, that's where things got really interesting. The wife who had second thoughts. I had no interest in keeping tabs on Mark. But then one day, I got a message. Not from him. His wife. My hands hovered over my phone, debating whether to read it. Curiosity won. Tessa, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to reach out. I had no idea he cut you out like that. If I had known, things would have been different. I'm so sorry. I stared at the words. For years, I had assumed she was part of the problem. But maybe she had just been another one of his victims. The final conversation. A month later, I got one last call from Mark, and this time, I answered. Not because I wanted to, but because I was curious. I let the silence stretch before I finally said, "What do you want?" He sighed, his voice hollow. "Tessa, I lost everything." I tilted my head. "Did you?" He let out a bitter chuckle. "My job, my wife, my stepkids don't even talk to me anymore." I stayed silent. I wanted him to sit in it, to feel the weight of what he had done. And then, he said the words I had been waiting for. "I did this to myself, didn't I?" For the first time, he was finally honest. I nodded. "Yeah, you did." The goodbye he never saw coming, he inhaled sharply. I wish I could go back," he admitted. I sighed. "We all wish we could go back," I said softly. "But some things can't be undone." Silence. Then his voice cracked. "Is there any way back for us?" I closed my eyes, and when I spoke, my voice was calm but firm. "No, Dad, there isn't," he exhaled shakily. I figured. And for the first time, he accepted it. I hung up, and just like that, I let him go. For good. Moving forward, life has a funny way of proving people wrong. For years, Mark had convinced himself that I needed him. But in the end, he was the one who needed me. And when he finally realized it, it was too late. Now, while he was picking up the pieces of his life, I was busy building mine, because I had spent my whole life waiting for a father who never chased me back. And now, I was done running.